Hello and welcome to my Singularity guide. This guide is going to include add-ons, perks, tips, strategies, so watch the whole video because there's a lot to learn about this killer.
Stop squabbling, you infinitesimal worm.
So the Singularity is a 115% movement speed, or 4.6, tall, 32 meter tear radius, standard killer. Basically the same as most. His power is called Quantum Instantiation. It allows him to place up to 8 at base biopods around the map. You can control these biopods to slipstream survivors. Once a survivor is slipstreamed, you can teleport to them through the cameras or through your gun directly, in which case you will just teleport to roughly 1 second behind them where they were. And you will enter overclock mode, in which if you get stunned by a pallet, it will just break in your head, and you can do other things faster, such as kick gens and kick pallets. Singularity is generally considered to be quite a difficult killer to play. Some would even say he's the hardest killer in the game to play. I disagree. I wouldn't say he's the hardest killer to play. He does take a lot of brain power. In terms of mechanical skill, he doesn't take a terrible amount, probably around the same mechanical skill as like maybe a plague would need. But it's mainly about your ability to keep track of things and your ability to manage survivors, generators, cameras, and everything else. So it does take a lot of brain power and effort to play, but I wouldn't say he's that difficult to get into. He's a little bit more difficult on console. I play on controller, so I guess technically I'm at a disadvantage, but generally I have no issues when it comes to shooting my cameras and stuff, so don't be discouraged if you're playing on console. In terms of strength, I'd say Singularity for most players is kind of around the high mid tier, you know, just below A tier killers. So like he's not that bad, but as you get better with Singularity and you become, you know, extremely proficient with him, I would say with the right build and add-ons, on most maps he is actually up there with some of the strongest killers in the game, like Oni, Arist, killers like that. So before I actually kind of get into playing Singularity and tips and chase, I'm just going to go over the add-ons first because Singularity's add-ons do kind of affect the way you play. And I want to go over what add-ons you should be using before I tell you how to play them, because there are certain add-ons that you pretty much should basically just be running every single game. So this right here is just a quick Singularity add-on tier list that I whipped up. I'm going to quickly go over some explanations for add-ons. I will skip a lot of them because they're just inconsequential. But I'll start with the S tier, is Soma Family Photo. This add-on might as well be a base kit. I and many other Singularity players literally use this add-on every game. There's no reason not to. It makes Singularity significantly stronger. It increases your movement speed during overclock by 5%, but reduces your overclock duration by 20%. Now that's your base overclock duration. Overclock lasts 4.7 seconds at base, so you're taking off about 0.9 seconds roughly, which is quite significant. But the benefit you get is, in my opinion, heavily outweighs the downside. Additionally, that 0.9 seconds does not change. For every survivor you have slipstreamed, your overclock is actually 1 second longer. So that 0.9 seconds is fixed, which means if you have 3 people slipstreamed, your overclock duration will still only be 0.9 seconds shorter and not like 1.5 seconds shorter. So this add-on, absolutely, you should be using it like every single game. And I'm going to basically treat this guide like you are using this add-on. As for the rest of the add-ons, I would say Soma Family Photo is an S tier because it is just his best add-on by a fairly wide margin. A tier add-ons are all good. This will be your second add-on slot. You're going to use one of these add-ons. B tier add-ons are kind of niche. They're not bad, technically, but honestly, if you use them, you're not really guaranteed any value out of them. C tier add-ons are generally just kind of bad. You're really going to struggle to actually get use out of them. And when you do get use, it might be difficult to tell like if you're actually getting value out of them. And the D tier add-ons are just basically useless. I would never use them because they're pretty much pointless. They will really do nothing for you. So I'm basically just going to skip over the C and D tier. You pretty much just won't use them. because they're just bad add-ons, and just to see if you saw like a good couple of minutes, I'm just going to ignore them. So A tier is Denied Requisition Form, which is his iridescent add-on. All survivors start the game slipstreamed, and at the start of the trial, EMPs take 30 seconds longer to generate. Now, I don't know if this add-on makes the EMPs take longer to generate if the survivor is accelerating the printing. I assume it doesn't, but it might. If it does, then that's good, and if it doesn't, well, I mean, the add-on's only slightly worse. This add-on is pretty good. You can get immediately into a chase. Everyone's already slipstreamed. You're going to have long overclocks, so your first chase is going to be very fast with this add-on. The only problem I have with it is this add-on significantly drops in value against a Survive with Friends, because what happens is, in a Survive with Friends, you're going to chase one guy, and then two people are going to stack on a generator, while the fourth survivor prints an EMP. Once that survivor prints an EMP, he's going to go over to his two teammates working on a generator, and all three of those survivors are going to get de-slipstreamed. The problem with this is, solo queue, you're going to have maybe two guys printing an EMP, with one guy standing next to another one waiting to get his slipstream removed. Which means you're going to have three people off gens for the first 40 seconds of the game, which is significantly better. Now, it's not bad against the Survive with Friends team, because you're still getting good early game delay and a fast first chase, but it's significantly better versus solo queue. So that's the reason I'm not a big fan of this add-on, because it's hard to kind of quantify its value sometimes. The next add-on is called Nutritional Slurry. You might find it kind of weird that two of his brown add-ons are two of his best add-ons, but that's just the type of killer Singularity is. He's one of those killers. Nutritional Slurry is very simple. It gives you 2 extra biopods. This is very good because the strategy that I use with Singularity, and the strategy you should probably be using, does require you to set up quite a lot of biopods. So if you have 2 extra, that's just really good. You can control more generators, you can place more biopods and choke points, you can place more biopods next to EMPs, and you might still have some left over for the chase. So this add-on is just really simple, really useful. You will get value out of it every single game. And also in the A tier is the Kids Ball Glove. Once again, very simple add-on, increases your overclock duration by 15%. Similar to Soma Family Photo, this is your base overclock duration. So it will be kind of like a constant 0.7 seconds of extra overclock roughly you're getting, which is very good. That could absolutely be the difference between you getting a hit or not. And when you combine it with Soma Family Photo, you basically negate the downside. So it's a very good add-on, and you're going to pretty consistently get value out of it. As for the B tier, these add-ons, they're not terrible, but you will kind of find it difficult to actually get any meaningful value out of them. The first add-on here reveals survivors' auras for 8 seconds when they become slipstreamed, and also increases the distance that survivors spread slipstream to each other by 2 meters. This add-on's okay. It makes the follow-up shot from your gun much easier if you can see their aura. You can anticipate them coming out from behind the wall, which is not too bad, but at the same time there's just better add-ons to run. This isn't going to give you tremendous value, but it's a feel-good add-on. I'd say a lot of Singularity players probably actually do run this add-on, because it's one of those ones that just make them feel a little bit nicer to play. The next add-on, Spin Oxygen Tank, adds exhaustion to survivors who become slipstreamed for 6 seconds. Before this add-on would actually be really good, before the Made for This nerf, but now that Made for This is nerfed, Dead Hard isn't that commonly used. You're kind of only countering Lithe and Sprint Burst, which Singularity doesn't really care about those perks too much anyway, so you're kind of just using an add-on slot to sort of counter perks that you don't really care about that much anyway. Next is Foreign Plant Fibers, reduces the hindered you get when you get stunned by a pallet in overclock mode by 20%, or 0.8 seconds. This add-on is very niche. Most of the time this add-on will do nothing for you, but on the off chance that you teleport to a pallet and a survivor then drops it on your head, so you can't get the hit, but the survivor dropped it really late on you, this add-on will actually allow you to pretty much catch up very quickly and then get a hit on them, so it's not terrible in that regard. And the last in the beat here is his Iridescent Crystal. This reveals survivors' auras within 6 meters of a placed biopod for a couple of seconds. It's okay, you can use it during chase to kind of, get your bearings and make sure that you can slipstream survivors pretty easily, but overall I'd say it's just not very useful. and it's not going to change the game for you, and it's not really going to get you any other hits that you wouldn't already have gotten. So that's pretty much all I have to say for add-ons. The rest are pretty useless, or just incredibly situational, so I would even bother touching the majority of those add-ons. So when it comes to perks, Singularity is actually quite an interesting killer. He's one of those killers that actually will get value out of some perks that most killers wouldn't. So I'm going to go over the perks I use, which in my opinion are the best perks to use for Singularity, and I'm actually going to go over some popular perks that people use that you shouldn't be using in Singularity. So in my opinion, the best build in Singularity is this. So as you see here, I have Surge, Rapid Brutality, Pain Resonance, and on the fourth perk I have Sloppy Butcher. Now I'm a Shadowborn user, and in the next update we're actually getting an FOV slider, which means I won't have to use Shadowborn. So I was kind of experimenting with a fourth perk slot. At the minute, I feel like Sloppy Butcher is a really good choice, but you could use some other things, Infectious Fright, Surveillance, anything else like that, but I will go over some perks you might want to use. So let me explain some of my perk choices here. First I use Surge and Pain Resonance. So the reason I'm using Surge is because A, Singularity is a basic attack only killer, which means you will always activate Surge upon downing a survivor. Next, Singularity, in my opinion, is a killer that you want to slug a lot with, and Surge is one of the only gen regression perks that you can use that don't require you to actually hook a survivor. This is also really good. It also works passively. You don't have to hook a survivor, you don't have to kick a generator, you don't have to do anything. If you're downing people, Surge will activate in generators, which is very good. I'm using Pain Resonance because when I do hook survivors, I don't actually have to kick the gens. It'll just hit a big 25% off the most progressed gen, which is very good, very helpful. So Pain Resonance, just a good perk in general, but also works very well in Singularity. The next perk I'm using is Rapid Brutality. There's some knowers and there's some non-knowers here, but Rapid Brutality is a shit perk. Rapid Brutality is terrible, but Rapid Brutality is very good on Singularity. The reason being, Rapid Brutality gives you a 5% heal for 10 seconds after hitting a survivor. For most killers, this is garbage. You will hit someone and then you will catch up 2 seconds faster maybe, which is just not good. However, on Singularity, you can teleport to a survivor that you just hit within about 3 seconds, which means you can hit someone and then teleport to them and still have about 6 seconds of haste left. This is incredibly good, especially with Soma Family Photo, because when you hit someone, you can teleport to them and be 10% faster for roughly the next 5 seconds, essentially guaranteeing that you will catch up to and hit the survivor before your overclock ends. This is incredibly strong and allows Singularity to get people down very, very fast. If you land the first hit and the survivor is slipstreamed and you teleport to them, you will generally get that second hit within the next 10 seconds. It's very strong and I recommend everyone uses it. For that reason, I think Rapid Brutality is a stable perk for Singularity. So generally the perks you want to use in Singularity are perks that are going to assist you even if you're not actually hooking a survivor, and it's going to regress generators without you actually having to kick the gen or be there. Also, information perks in Singularity, you want to use specific types. I suggested Surveillance because that's going to work well with Surge and Pain Resonance. So, you know, say I hook a survivor and then I see a gen turn white across the map and then I see it turn yellow, I know to check that biopod near that generator because there's going to be a survivor on it. But overall, I wouldn't recommend running info perks on Singularity that much because your cameras generally do most of the work. Now I'm going to go over some perks that most people run in other killers, but I wouldn't recommend you run a Singularity, not because they're going to really hurt you that much, but because there's certain things about Singularity that are going to make those perks much less effective. The first perk is Pop. Pop is not a bad perk, but on Singularity, you're just not going to have time to kick generators. And if you're going out of your way to kick gens and stuff, you're probably going to be losing quite a bit of pressure on the team. That also goes for stuff like Overcharge or Eruption. Generally, a Singularity, you will not kick gens. I'd say on average, I maybe kick gens once or twice every couple of games. simply because there's just other things to be at. Another perk that a lot of people use in other killers, which you probably shouldn't be using in Singularity, is Deadlock. Deadlock is an okay perk, but in Singularity, the thing is, like if you're using Deadlock on Hillbilly, alright, and if I'm a survivor and I'm working on a gen against a Hillbilly, and my gen gets deadlocked, I'm gonna go have to find another generator and go work on it, and then Deadlock does its job, which is nice. But against Singularity, if I'm working on a gen and it gets deadlocked, I'm just gonna go print an EMP. And by the time I've gone and done that and come back to my generator, it's probably going to be unblocked. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, you got them off the gen for a couple of seconds, but the survivors can always be using that time to be productive. Deadlock also just has counters, so I wouldn't be using perks like Pop, Deadlock, stuff like that. Additionally, just chase perks like Spirit Fury Enduring, you don't want to be using perks like that. Save the Best for Last, you do know what I'll be using. You catch up anyway by just teleporting. Save the Best for Last is a waste of a perk slot. So just try to avoid these types of perks because they just don't work too well in Singularity. So now that I've gone over perks, add-ons, stuff like that, general overview of how the killer works, so what do you actually want to do when you're playing Singularity? So my general strategy is when I start the game, I'm going to look for generators and my EMP crates. And what I want to do is start placing my biopods so that they're covering as much of a gen as possible. So for example, if there's a generator that could be worked on by 3 sides, I want to place a biopod that can cover all 3 sides of those generators. Additionally, if there's an EMP crate nearby, I want that biopod to cover as much of the gen as possible and the EMP crate. And if there's just an EMP crate on its own, you want to place a biopod facing the EMP crate. This is essential because what's going to happen is if a survivor's working on a generator and I check my camera and I slipstream them, their first instinct every time is to run to the nearest EMP crate, pick it up, and then get rid of their slipstream. But if I have a camera near the EMP crate, what's going to happen is they're going to run to the EMP crate and I'm going to teleport to them, which allows me to initiate a chase from across the map. So generally what I will do when I start the game is do as much of that as possible, but don't go too out of your way or you will start to lose gens at the start of the match. Find a survivor, chase a survivor, down that survivor, and when you down them, check your cameras, check your generator cameras, and if you find someone working on a generator, what you want to do is what I just said. Slipstream them, teleport to them, and leave the survivor that you just downed slipstreamed and on the ground. What's going to happen now is you're going to chase someone across the map, and the person you just downed is going to have to get picked up, and will spread their slipstream to the person that picked them up. So in this clip right here, this is an example of downing a slipstream survivor and then teleporting across the map. You can see here, Ada's slipstream spreads her slipstream to the person who just gone hooked. I leave Ace on the ground, I teleport to the slipstream survivors, and now I have much more pressure, because look, now I'm chasing someone across the entire map, and if the Renato who isn't slipstreamed comes and picks up the Ace, he is also going to get slipstreamed. This just creates immense pressure. And you can see that I have someone down, and then across the entire map I have another person down almost immediately. In this clip I show an example of having biopods near gens and also near EMPs. So you can see here, he's working a gen, I slipstream him, he tries to run to the EMP crate, but I have a biopod, so I teleport to him as he's grabbing the EMP. Then I get a free easy hit, he even gives me the pallet. Rapid Brutality, so my family foe, as you can see I catch up incredibly fast, he doesn't make it to anywhere, and he goes down. That can happen a lot if you simply just have the right biopod set up. In this clip I show an example of hitting a survivor and be constantly checking my cameras. I hear progress in the gen above me here, I don't hear anyone working on it, but I just check my biopod, and I slipstream a survivor that's working on a gen and barely lose any distance on Nancy. In this clip I show an example of a good network of tunnels. You can see here I slipstream Yunjin, and then I can predict where she's going to go. I go to another biopod and then I get the teleport. Generally you want to space out your biopods so that you do have a little network. It's kind of like Hag. Generally you want to keep them near generators and point at EMPs, but if you have some extra biopods, especially if you have the add-on to give more, you can place them in choke points to catch people that are just running through the map after you slipstream them. So one of the biggest skills of Singularity is kind of adapting as you go along in the map. The more you learn about the individual aspects of the map throughout the match, the stronger you'll become. The more you learn about where gens are and where you can place biopods to cover them, the more about where you learn where the EMP crates are, and the more you learn about survivors' playstyles, the stronger you're going to be, and you need to be constantly taking notes from the moment the match starts about what's going on. It's one of the hardest parts about Singularity, and you know why he starts off in a bad spot, but the longer the match goes on, the more you learn, the better it becomes, and the less gens you have to control, the stronger. You know, Singularity is very good at defending generators, so it's a lot easier to defend 2 generators than it is to defend 5. So just keep remembering that. The more gens you lose, the harder it becomes for survivors to complete more. Some aspects of Singularity also overlap. For example, like if you're good at Artist and you can kind of predict survivors' movement from across the map, you also might be good at Singularity. You can see there I kind of predicted that Michaela would be running past that biopod, so I switched to it and I actually got a slipstream on her. I then switched to a different biopod because this one is near an EMP, so I start checking the closest EMP that she would be running to, and sure enough she runs to it and I get a teleport on her. And I also get the hit, so stuff like that, you know, is also incredibly important. You need to have really good map awareness, and you need to know the survivors you're going up against. You need to see how they play. Survivors are very predictable, and 90% of the time when you slipstream a survivor, they're just going to run to the closest EMP and pick it up. Survivors are absolute demons for EMPs, and you can take advantage of that, and they don't know what to do when you have pods near EMPs, because every time they go for one, you just keep teleporting to them anyway. And teams like this, you will absolutely crush. The problem is when you get teams that kind of sneakily get their EMPs and always have one ready, an EMP for their teammates, that's when problems start arising. So when you're going against a very strong coordinated team like that, the best thing you can do is just stay calm. I kind of trust the process. Make sure to keep using perks like Surge and Pain Resonance, keep the gens regressing, keep slugging people, keeping them slipstreamed, taking chases when you know where to take them. You do not want to spend too much time in your cams. You want to be always checking your cameras, but you don't want to spend too much time in them because that's going to give survivors just free time to do whatever they want. The main thing about Singularity is you're a pressure killer. You can apply a significant amount of pressure because if you're slugging people and hooking people and chasing people, survivors have a lot to do. They have to pick each other off the ground, they have to heal each other, they have to do generators, they have to print EMPs, they have to remove slipstream. There's so much to do if you're applying pressure correctly as Singularity, more than other killers. So you can put immense pressure on a team as long as you're doing well in chase and your biopod placements are correct and you're able to pressure generators from afar. That's the main thing you should be focused on a Singularity, is keeping the pressure up. As long as you can do that and you don't give survivors any room to breathe, you will win the majority of your games as Singularity. So when you're actually chasing a survivor as Singularity, what are some things that you can do to improve your chase? Well, there's actually a few little, neat things you can do with your power. There's nothing crazy. This isn't like Blight where there's like a million different things you can do in chase, but there are a few things that you can do other than just keep continuously teleporting to survivors and getting pallets dropped in your head. So I already mentioned that you should be using Soma Family Foe and Rapid Brutality. Essentially, as soon as you hit a survivor, teleport as fast as you possibly can to get that extra haste. That's a big tip I can give you, because that is one of the strongest things that you can do in chase of Singularity. So now I'm just going to quick fire a few tips. So if a survivor isn't slipstreamed, this is generally what you want to do. Place a biopod where they run nice and high up, slipstream them, teleport to them, usually do a little mind game or something like that, and hit. Pretty general stuff. Additionally, some survivors, like in this clip, will straight up just not even think about what you're doing. You can see here in this clip, I teleport and she just panics and just drops the pallet. She doesn't even look behind her. Most survivors assume you'll just try and walk through the pallet, but you can just walk around it and usually they'll get hit. Another thing you can do is bait survivors into thinking you're going to teleport. You can see here, Claudette drops the pallet. I place a biopod and I fake to teleport. I just cancel that second and she falls into me. Another example of this here, because it does work quite often, I put a biopod up here, slipstream, teleport, she just drops the pallet, and I get another hit. So a lot of survivors will just assume you'll try and go through the pallet, so you can switch up. Another thing you can do is faking one direction and then teleporting the other, and this will basically cause survivors to just straight up walk into you. like that. This is virtually a guaranteed hit every single time, and it works quite consistently. You can see here in this clip I do it again. I slipstream, teleport to her. There's too much distance, I know I'm not going to get hit, so I force her around the side, I switch direction and teleport at the same time, and she just runs into me. So those are just some of the tricks that you can use in Chase. Basically, faking one direction, pushing a survivor around, and then teleporting to them as you switch direction is going to cause them to run back on themselves. And since Singularity teleports to where the survivor was roughly 1 second ago, they're basically just going to run into you, which guarantees a hit. This works, like, this is basically a guaranteed hit on low loops, similar to Huntress. Like, if you've line of sight in a survivor in a loop, you will hit them on virtually every loop, even if it's a good survivor. And then obviously some survivors will just drop pallets without even thinking. You can just straight up walk around them and then you can hit them because they think you're going to try and walk through it. And a lot of survivors will fall into or run into or leave the loop or do whatever if you fake a teleport. So you can definitely switch it up. Don't be doing it every time. Stay unpredictable, and then hopefully your chases will last significantly shorter, instead of just constantly teleporting to a survivor, breaking a pallet, teleporting to them, breaking another pallet. Your chases are going to last very long. But if you implement some of these tricks that I just showed, your chases should speed up quite significantly. So that's pretty much everything I have to say about Singularity. Hopefully you learned something. If you try and implement all these little tricks in Chase, your chases should speed up. And if you follow the strategy of slugging survivors and keeping your EMPs pointed at EMP crates and generators, you should hopefully improve significantly. Obviously, nothing beats practice, so you gotta play Singularity. Don't be expecting to just go in and start winning your games. It will take a bit of practice, but Singularity is a very strong killer. Could he use buffs? Maybe. Now that they're nerfing 3 gens, hopefully they will give some Singularity a little boost. But overall, he's a fun killer, and hopefully you learned something. Thanks for watching.